Assistant Director of New Student Orientation here at UAB. And today I'm so excited to get to share with you all the leadership lessons that I learned from Leslie Knope. Okay, now I know that this may sound like quite a concept to you. So I just want to know, well, first of all, everyone turn off your cameras. I'm a very dynamic presenter, so I definitely need your engagement here. Everyone go ahead and turn off your cameras. Okay, okay. Now turn your cameras back on if you have seen Parks and Recreation. Yes, okay. I love it. So many people have seen it. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I'm glad that we have so many fans of Parks and Rec. Okay, everyone can go ahead and turn your cameras back on. So just so you know, you do not have to have seen Parks and Recreation and be familiar with every single character in order to gain something from this presentation, but I really love Parks and Rec. Several years ago, I binged the show and I was like, I think there are some leadership lessons here that I could talk about. So I'm really excited to share with you all as we watch some clips of Parks and Rec and identify some things that you are going to be able to take into your own personal lives and grow as professionals. Okay, hold on, got to do a little switcheroo with my screen sharing here. So the next thing that we're going to do, there is a communication style self-assessment that I would like all of you to take a few minutes to complete. It's going to be very brief. It's just, let's see, there we go. All right, I just put that in the chat. So if you're able to, go ahead and download that and then open that. I'm also going to share it on my screen. So if that's not something you're able to do, maybe just grab a sheet of paper and number it 1 through 20 so that you can complete this, this survey. Alrighty. Okay, so what you should be, are y'all seeing a document on my screen that says communication style self-assessment? Awesome. So what you're going to do, just follow the directions that are listed up there on the screen. For each of these questions or statements that are there, you're going to assign a number based on how you feel you rate yourself on each of those statements. Now, this isn't how you think someone should communicate or how you think I want you to respond on this. I want you to only respond with how you feel you rate yourself on each of these 20 statements that we have here. And then on the back half, you will actually be able to calculate and determine what your top communication style is or top communication styles once you do that. So I'm going to give you all some time to work on that. I'm going to play some Bridgerton soundtrack. Give us a little 3-minute timer. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll be happy to respond. Also, if you are using the version I'm sharing on my screen, just put it in the chat once y'all are ready for me to scroll down to the last 3 statements. I will do so. I see that request for it in the chat one more time. I will do that.
No.
Too far? Too far?
Sorry, I thought I was muted.
No, you're fine. I'm gonna scroll down a little bit more so y'all can see how to score that. All right. Hopefully y'all were able to calculate that. And if you weren't, I'm going to put the corresponding statements that you need to add up the numbers for in the chat. So that way you can work on that on your own as we keep going with the presentation. Let's see. All right, there we go. Okay, yes, so hello. Today we're going to be talking about the leadership lessons that I learned from Leslie Knope. But first of all, hi, I'm Clay Like the Dirt. Like Georgia said, I'm the Assistant Director of New Student Orientation at UAB. And what you're about to hear from me is a presentation that I've been developing for about 6 years now. It's gone through several different forms. When I was first the orientation intern at UAB, I gave this presentation at the Southern Regional Orientation Workshop and then went on to share it at a national conference as well. And it's something that we still use to this day to help our students develop professionally and how to communicate with one another when they find themselves in a conflict in the workplace. And I want you to know that I was in your shoes not too long ago. No, I was not a VISTA, but I was in the AmeriCorps program. I served as an AmeriCorps volunteer with Literacy First in Austin, Texas in 2018 and 2019, along with Georgia. We got to work with some pretty awesome students. And in fact, there's Georgia and I. One of the versions of this presentation was when we gave it at the Life After AmeriCorps conference in Texas. So hopefully the skills that Georgia and I developed together are going to be something that you can take with you into your professional careers and you even utilize during your time as VISTAs. Now, there are several things that I want you to take away from today. First of all, I want you to learn something new about yourself from this session. We've already taken the time for you to calculate your own score so that you can identify your communication style. This is going to come into play, and it's something that I find myself thinking about every single day and how I can be a better communicator and make sure that I'm winning in the conversation, and so is whoever I'm talking with. Second, I want you to understand the different types of conflict, as well as those that are most likely for you to see in your workspace. And then finally, we're going to take some time to practice resolving conflict with one another with some scenarios. The first lesson that I learned from Leslie Knope was to communicate thoughtfully. Now, in every conversation, you can have winners or you can have losers. And that's based on two different variables. The first variable is the directness that you communicate in expressing your needs, your wants, and opinions. You know, this can be really blunt. This can be kind of indirect. You can imply it and hope someone understands. It can be something that's inferred. And I'm sure we've all had, we can all think of times where we wish we were getting a little bit more clear communication from whoever we were talking with. The second variable is the consideration of others' feelings when you communicate those needs, wants, and opinions. I think we all know someone who is really thoughtful and always puts care into the way that they speak to us. And I think we also know people who can be pretty thoughtless. So hopefully we can identify those ways so that you can always use those variables to your advantage. Now, if for Parks and Recreation fans, we are going to identify each of the 4 communication styles, and I've assigned them to a character. But before we get into each one of these, I do want to just say that although these characters may have predominant communication styles, they're not always going to be communicating in that way. In the same way that we're humans, so whatever score you got, whatever your number one communication style was, you won't always communicate in that way, but it may be the one that you most commonly fall back into. Now, the first communication style I want you to understand is the aggressive communicator. And from Parks and Rec, I chose Ron Swanson to represent that. He is someone who is very good at directly expressing his needs, wants, and opinions, but he often gives no thought to other people's feelings in these situations. This often results in an I win, you lose communication style. And an example of that is when Ron just straight up said that he was not interested in caring about other people. That's a pretty aggressive communicator, if you ask me. Next up, we have the passive aggressive communicator, April Ledgate. She's someone who indirectly expresses her needs, wants, and opinions. And often, because of that passive aggressive communication style, it can come off as her own needs being more important than others. This also can result in an I win, you lose conversation. An example of a time April was passive aggressive was when she very maturely and straightforwardly left anonymous comments about her coworker Donna online. Yeah, really great way to communicate there, that's for sure. Next, we have our passive communicators. Dang it, Jerry. Jerry Gergich is our passive communicator. He often does not express his needs, wants, and opinions very clearly, and he often puts other people's needs above his own, even to his own detriment. For an example, in one episode, he caught himself on fire because he was not willing to express his needs, wants, and opinions clearly. This is very much an I lose, you win result. Finally, we have our assertive communicators, and I chose Chris Traeger to represent assertive communicators. He's someone who often clearly expresses his needs, wants, and opinions, and is very considerate and respectful of other people's needs. If you're someone who watches the show, you know he loves to refer to people by their first and last name because he wants to show them that sign of respect. He often ends up with an I win, you win result in his conversations. And an example of a time that he was assertive in his communication was when he was participating in this game and he died in the game as a participant, but he was still really happy about it. He was glad everyone was learning something. So this was an I win result. Now, I want everyone to, if you can, hop on your phone and go to slido.com or sly.do. And you're going to type in the code KNOP, hashtag nope. And once you're there, I want you to tell me what your top communication style was from the communication style self-assessment. All right, I see we've got an aggressive communicator. And this is completely anonymous, so feel free to share. Also, if you had a tying score on your top communication styles, you can mark multiple. Okay, looks like we had 2 assertive, 1 aggressive communicator. Okay, a passive aggressive in there. Okay, lots of assertive folks. I love that. Awesome, awesome. Okay, so we have lots of folks who are coming, whose top was assertive. A few folks. Okay, we have aggressive, passive, and passive aggressive. So for me, my communication style that I most frequently use, or that that I tend to slide into the most, is aggressive. And when I was first doing this, I was like, oh my God, am I a bad person? Am I always walking all over people's things? And if I don't think about it, the truth to that answer is yes, I can do that. But hopefully today I'm going to show you some tips so that you can always use your communication style to your advantage so that you can end up with that I win, you win result. So we are going to watch some clips from Parks and Recreation, and I want you to tell me in the chat as we're watching it what communication styles you think we're seeing. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to unmute and tell me your thoughts. So don't be afraid to speak up as we're watching this. Now, for some context, we have Ben and we have Chris in this clip, and I just want you to watch this and tell me what communication styles you think they're using. Okay. Sound is shared. Let me know if you'll have trouble hearing this.
When we were state auditors, we had an amazing system.
Yeah, Chris pumped everyone up and made them feel positive and happy, and I swooped in and slashed their budgets to ribbons.
Like a majestic alley-oop. You're all amazing!
You're all fired.
Teamwork.
Okay, unmute, post in the chat. What communication styles did we see here? Maybe we can start with Ben. What communication styles did we see from Ben? Okay, I see someone said aggressive and assertive. Someone said Ben is aggressive. Someone said Chris is assertive. Does everyone agree that Chris is assertive? Yes, everyone agrees. I don't know. I think there might be a different communication style that we're seeing here from Chris. Both aggressive. Kayla said both. Chris is passive aggressive. He knows they're gonna get fired, and he straight up doesn't tell them. Yeah, I agree. I think that we're getting a resulting passive aggressive communication style here, right? Because the needs, wants, and opinions are not being communicated clearly, and it's in such a way that there's an I win, you lose result. And it's not giving that thought to the other people's feelings. So yes, we have, I would say this is passive aggressive that we're seeing here. All right, for our next one, the people I want you to be focusing on are Leslie Nope and Ann Perkins. So Leslie, she's the person who was on the first title screen of this presentation. And then Ann Perkins is the brunette who is sitting at the table.
Oh, goody, you're all here. Now, I know
Ooh.
I'm not supposed to talk. Oh, goody, you're all here. Now, I know I'm not supposed to talk about my campaign in the office, but last night. Oh, goody, you're all here. Now, I know I'm not supposed to talk about my campaign in the office, but last night I made a decision about who should be my campaign manager. This is a huge job. This is going to require a lot of late night one-on-one jam sessions with me, and we're going to bounce ideas off of each other. You're going to have to take calls from me anytime, day or night. The person I have chosen is, drumroll please, Ann Perkins.
Yep.
Hey, give it up for him.
Oh,
Good choice.
Leslie, I don't know the first thing about running a political campaign.
Man, you beautiful tropical fish. You're smart as a whip, and you're cool under pressure. You've resuscitated a human heart in your bare hands.
No, I haven't.
You haven't?
No.
You will. You're that good of a nurse.
What about Ben? I mean, he ran for mayor at 18 and won.
Ben is poison in my campaign. Our relationship is the reason why my advisors pulled out. Anne, don't listen to your head or your heart. Just look at my eyes and say yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes! I believe in you, Anne.
Thank you.
And your first job as my campaign manager is to start dressing like one. I don't want to have this conversation again.
All right, what communication styles did we see here? Leslie is assertive and Anne is passive. Okay. Leslie aggressive and Anne tried to be assertive but ended up getting pushed over and being passive. Leslie aggressive and passive. Yeah, I really agree with what Alex said in the chat. I think you see two very distinct communication styles here, but especially with Leslie, right? She starts off very aggressive. She chooses Anne. Anne really has no choice in the situation. And my favorite, like, I think the most characteristic line from this clip is of an aggressive communicator is when Leslie said, "Don't listen to your head or your heart, just look into my eyes and say yes." And I can admit I've had moments where I've wanted to say that, but you have to make sure you're listening for that I win, you win result. But Anne was assertive, right? She offered up other solutions. She recommended Ben. She said, "Leslie, I may not be the best choice. I'm your friend, but Ben knows way more about running a political campaign than me." But in the end, she ended up being passive just because Leslie's communication style was so strong in that aggressive mindset. Yes, looks like everyone is agreeing passive and aggressive. I would agree there.
My campaign.
Okay, now for our, where'd it go? There we go. For our final clip, I think you need a little bit of background context. So in the last clip, you heard Leslie mention that Ben is poison to her campaign because of their relationship. And so what we're seeing here is a conversation between Ben and Leslie when Ben got a wonderful job offer to move to DC. This would be something that would really advance his career, but Leslie had concerns that this would put strain on their relationship. So let's see how they communicate here and see if this is something they can resolve.
There you are. Thank God. We're going to get the final results any minute.
I know. Do you have both my speeches?
Yes, you seem calmer than I expected you'd be.
I got you something. Let me open it for you. You have to go to Washington.
I told you, I'm turning it down.
I was being selfish. You put your whole life on hold for me. The very least I can do is try to return the favor.
Are you sure about this?
We can make it work. I'll go visit you, then you come visit me, then I go visit you again, and then we make out in the Lincoln bedroom, and the Jefferson Memorial, and the Supreme Court Gallery. We'll do it all over Washington.
Thank you.
Okay, what communication styles did we see here from Ben and Leslie? Anyone? Everyone wins. Yes, both being assertive from both. Yes, I would agree. This is an example of assertive communication because there was an I win, you win result. They both had to give a little and recognize that there were both things that they had contributed to this relationship and ways they could still make it work. So yes, we're seeing assertive communication, and I'm glad to see that y'all are recognizing that as well in the chat. Okay, the second lesson that I learned from Leslie Knope was to approach conflict with respect. Now, there are 4 major types of conflict, okay? The first one is interpersonal conflict. That's conflict between 2 individuals. So let's say that Georgia and I are in the same class and she cheats off my test. If I'm mad at Georgia for cheating off my test, then that's interpersonal conflict. That's conflict between 2 individuals. Now, if Georgia starts to feel upset because she cheated off my test, that's intrapersonal conflict because that's conflict within an individual. Another example of conflict that can be seen more commonly in the workplace is intergroup conflict, and that's conflict among different teams within an organization. So is there anyone here who has different teams within the organizations that you all work in? Would anyone share like what those teams are? They don't necessarily have to be in conflict. No? Okay. Well, at my institution, so at UAB, I supervise the orientation leaders, and there can sometimes be a pretty competitive spirit between the orientation leaders and our student tour guides, the trailblazers. So if they were ever to have some sort of competitive mindset, that could result in an example of intergroup conflict. I see Annie also said office staff and drive-through food box staff. So those may be 2 groups that, if they were to get into a competitive spirit, could have intergroup conflict. Finally, we have intra-group conflict, which is conflict among individuals within a team. So if there is some greater conflict that's impacting several individuals, I've often seen this happen when there are 2 individuals having an interpersonal conflict that grows and gossip happens and it involves multiple people in a team. It can become intra-group conflict when more and more people are getting involved. There's a few things you should consider when you want to approach a teammate or a coworker about a certain conflict. First, you want to consider who should you approach. Is it the individual? Maybe this is something that you and that individual can work out on your own. Maybe this is something that has escalated and you've tried having that conversation with the other individual and you realize that you may need some additional support, that you may want to go to your supervisor. And maybe you're in conflict with your supervisor. That's something that can sometimes happen. And in which case there's human resources representatives that are often available that you can go to get that additional support to help manage that relationship between you and your supervisor. You also want to consider what's going to happen after this conflict is resolved. Are we seeking a resolution here that can be resolved? Is this something that's going to be working for us? Is this someone who's my friend? Should we go do something fun after so that we can remember the friendship that we have and not just remember the conflict? These are all important things to consider when approaching a friend. Could anyone put in the chat, how do you prefer to be approached? Are you someone who likes when someone approaches you directly in the moment? Are you someone who needs space to think about what happened? Ooh, sorry, y'all, my PowerPoint shut down. But yes, please respond. How do you prefer to be approached in conflict? Georgia said directly. I like to be I like to be approached directly in person from Mike. Yeah, I think that's really important as well. I think if there's anything the pandemic's taught us, it's how virtual communication can very easily be misconstrued because you don't always hear the tone of it. Even via Zoom, it can be hard. Even if you're seeing someone's face and hearing their inflection, there are moments that can be difficult. It looks like we have a lot of folks who are really direct communicators. We have Annie said directly and kind. Yes, that's also very important. Also directly in person, but not in front of others. Yeah, that's another important piece as well. Yes, I'm so glad that y'all said not in front of others and in private, because the next thing that we're going to discuss are some key steps in actually having that conflict resolution conversation. Now, so there are 4 main steps that y'all should consider. First, or that I recommend considering. First, you want to set the stage. If you're going to have a conversation with someone, choose a neutral location. I would not want to call in someone, a coworker of mine, to have a conflict mediation discussion in my office, because that's not a neutral space. That's my space. We could go to a conference room, or maybe we could even go to a park on campus if it's a location that's private enough. And that's the second important piece. You want to make sure that the conversation that you're having is private and is in a space where only parties involved are present. So you could do that in a conference room, or if it's a private enough area, outside. Maybe there is some other mutual meeting space that you could use and rent out a room. Go to a different location on a location at where you work. You also want to make sure you sit each individual on the same level. I think it's important to not have someone who is standing and one person who is sitting, or one person who's like sitting up on the armchair of a couch, because then you have an uneven level, and even if you're not meaning to, it creates an unequal conversation. So you want to make sure you're setting the stage so that it can be neutral, private, and on the same level. I see in the chat there.
Can't quite.
Oh no, you can't see my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Georgia. Sorry about that. Okay. I just talked about number 1 there, the neutral location, private location, same level. Yes, I see where Kit put in the chat. I do think it's important to take a little bit of processing time before addressing a conflict to ensure that all parties are coming to it not in that first flush of emotional reaction. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's absolutely valid. And it's important for each individual to consider, how do I want to be approached in this moment, and also recognize the person I'm communicating with may have a different approach. So I may need to take that time to stop, reflect, give us a break so that we can not come in hot in that conversation. So the second step in conflict resolution is to listen to the other person, as well as to share your side. You want to make sure that there's an equal balance in that conversation, which is why it's so important to sit on the same level. It's a lot easier to do that in that way. One tip that I like to share is using I statements. So when I was a resident assistant at UAB, I would often mediate conversations between my residents, and I encouraged them to not say things like, you didn't do the dishes, and so now it stinks because of you, and you didn't do your turn on the trash, and now it stinks in here. Instead, they could say something like, I don't appreciate when the dishes aren't done, or when the trash isn't taken out, because it makes the room stinks, and I feel unwelcome in my own home when it stinks. And so using those I statements sound much less threatening, and much less like you're trying to place blame. And it sounds much more like you're trying to make understanding the priority, rather than who's going to win in this conflict or who's going to be right. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter who was right. What matters is the solution, which brings us to step 3, discuss the solution. You want to make sure you're focusing on the present and letting go of whatever past resentments you may have had with that individual. You've got to sometimes just be willing to agree to disagree on what happened in the past, so that you can make sure you're coming to that resolution that is agreed on by all parties. And then finally, step number 4, you want to close by reviewing the agreed resolution. Make sure all parties involved are absolutely clear on what needs to happen going forward, and that they understand what the resolution is. And I said hug it out, but in these days, you may want to social distance and just do something fun together so that you can move on and not just remember that your last interaction with that person was a conflict. So from Parks and Rec, we have this example here of individuals in conflict and a mediator. So as you can see, we have the 2 individuals in conflict, and Anne is going to be the mediator in this conversation. As you can see, she's done a pretty good job of choosing this location to have a conversation. It's neutral, it's in a conference room, it's not in Leslie's office or at April's desk, which is in a common space. It's a neutral location. You can also see that over here on the right-hand side, the door is closed, so it's a private conversation, and everyone is seated on the same level. Can anyone tell me a mistake that Anne made in setting up this room? Yes, Kit said window. Annie said the blinds are open. Yes, dang it, Jerry. If only Anne had pulled down those blinds, then it would be a completely private conversation so that Jerry wasn't peeping in through the window. I also see that someone asked a question in the chat. Jay said, one thing I was thinking about is the nature of the relationship of the 2 people within an organization. For example, are the 2 colleagues on the same level, or is one the boss of the other? It's my recommendation that no matter who the conversation is between, that all individuals are seated on the same party, or seated on the same level. When a conflict, if you do find yourself in conflict with your supervisor or with your boss, I would recommend going to an outside source that can be a neutral mediator, such as an HR representative who can help with that. Deidre said they should sit at one side of the table. Why do you say that, Deidre? I think that's interesting. That's not something I've thought of before.
I say that because just in mediations in general, like in the legal field, I know that they usually have a mediator sit and then have one party on either side. And I feel like there's a power, there's always a power that goes to the person that sits at the head of the table.
Do you think that it's different when it's the mediator who's sitting at the head of the table rather than the individuals in conflict?
Well, I think that that's fine. Also, it's just something I noticed that another way to do that would be for them to, have Anne say sit beside Leslie and well, I can't think of her name, on the other side of Anne.
Yes. Okay. I think that makes sense. I think for me, if I was to place a mediator between 2 individuals of conflict, I like the idea of them all being in a neutral sitting location so that one person doesn't have more power than the other. But if one person did need to have the power, I think it's that of the mediator, right? Because they're going to be the one who's responsible for facilitating that and saying, look, I understand you're upset, but I want to make sure that we're giving space to both of the parties to share their thoughts and opinions on what's going on. But I also think, Deidre, that you're right. Like sitting directly across from someone can be an easy way to see the emotions that they're experiencing. And if that's a negative emotion, it can fire up something inside of you too. So yeah, I think there's not one correct way to necessarily do this as long as everyone is seated on the same level. Thanks for pointing that out. All right, so as long as if you're in a mediation situation, hopefully if you set the stage, listen and share, find a solution and review, hopefully you can make your conflicts go from looking like this to something. Now we are going to practice this together by going into breakout rooms. We're gonna put y'all into groups of 2. If we have an odd number, then we'll do a group of 3. And you're gonna practice conflict resolution with one person playing as the approacher and then the other as the approachee. And then we're going to switch partners for each scenario, and you should play a new role each time. So if you're in the group of 3, then I want one of you to practice being a mediator. But for otherwise groups of 2, one person will be the approacher and the other is the approachee. For our first scenario, you have made friends with a coworker who likes to stop by your desk to chat on a daily basis. While this is fun at first, you begin to realize you are falling behind in work due to your friend taking up so much. All right, so we're gonna make some breakout rooms here. Let's see. Georgia, how many participants do we have here who would be participating?
24,
24, okay.
I think. So 12 rooms.
Okay. I just made 12 rooms. Would you be able to assign participants? And you can even tell me who to assign as well. Sorry, I know that's a lot of folks to put in.
Assign how?
Oh, if you click the breakout rooms button, then on the right hand side, there's like and you hover over their name, you can click assign to and then put them in a room.
Okay. Do you want to start at the top or the bottom?
You can start from the top. That sounds good.
I'm clicking. At the bottom of the screen, y'all should see something that is inviting you to join to the room. If it has not yet popped up, it will pop up soon. I am halfway done.
All right, it looks like everyone is back. I hope y'all were able to successfully resolve that scenario. Could anyone share with me either in the chat or just by unmuting and speaking up, what were some things that stuck out to you from that conversation? Things that made you feel really good, ways that people responded, or ways that you think it may have been able to be handled better?
Well, I'll talk. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say one thing. So I was with Mike, and one thing that he did that I thought was super helpful was in the sort of imaginary scenario of me like showing up at his desk, like he asked me what was going on with me, like was I busy, did I have a lot going on, and that like prompted me to then be like, oh, are you busy? And then like, oh, is this a bad time? Like, so I think like modeling that like question to be asked was helpful because it made like me in my role like imagine like have that reaction of like, oh, you just asked me if I'm busy, maybe you're busy, which I think was a really good way of going about it.
Yeah, and I think it was Deidre who just put it in the chat. That's consideration of other people's feelings, right? So you may not just be super directly expressing, hey, you need to leave me alone, I have work to do, because that would hurt someone's feelings, right? But potentially reminding them, hey, I've got something going on, can we talk later? That can be a really considerate way to go about that.
We made a plan in hours to meet for lunch in one scenario and to talk on our long drives home from work on the phone in the other scenario.
I love it. That's such a great way to resolve that. You know, just let's set aside that time to have that conversation. So I include this scenario because this used to be me when I was a student assistant in the campus visit center. I would always go up and just chat the ears off of our person who was working at the front desk. And we eventually just had to schedule hangout times, happy hours to go to so that we could do that so she could get her work done. And she was really great at, Deidre, like you mentioned, finding that time to make me still feel valid and being able to have that connection with her without shutting me down. All right, so we are going to go back into breakout rooms, and I have a second scenario for y'all to discuss. And that is up on the screen now. It says you are in a meeting when a coworker keeps cutting you off and dominating the conversation. You don't want to be rude, but you're afraid your ideas aren't being heard. All right, we're going to open those breakout rooms back up, and you're going to practice that conversation with your group. But before you do, I'm going to put the scenario in the chat. All right, I just put it in the chat, so y'all should have it when you go to your breakout rooms. Go ahead and go. You'll have about 5 minutes to discuss that. All right, hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you were all able to resolve those conflicts in 120 seconds. You should all be pros at this point, right? So was there anything that stuck out to y'all from that conversation?
Well, for me, um, I was in the room with Dennis, and I told Dennis that this scenario actually did happen to me. So
Oh,
what I did was each time I tried to present my idea, I would make sure it was wrote down. And so the last time the person interrupted me, I let him finish, and then I looked at him and I said, "Now is it okay for me to speak?" And so of course he did not like the way um, I approached him, but I thought I was very nice and being very professional. And so I presented everything. And in some of the instances, he still tried to interrupt. So I asked the person that was running the meeting, was it okay if I keep presenting because he keep interrupting? And so we finally came to, so and then when the meeting was over, I went to him just to ask him, is there an issue between us? Is it something that we need to talk about? And so we stood there for a few minutes and we talked about it. And he said that he wasn't trying to be rude. And he gave me an opportunity to express how I feel, and I let him express how he feel. And then we came to a mutual agreement that it wouldn't happen again.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's an excellent example of a time where, okay, we're in front of all these people. How do I use my nonverbals? How do I use my
Yeah.
verbals to communicate, that I have something I need to say too. And I love that you took the time to have a conversation with them directly as well, so that you could come to that mutual understanding. Um, Awesome. For the sake of time, I want to make sure I am respectful of y'all's time. I am going to go ahead and move on, but I hope that y'all were able to take something and really put those communication styles into practice with those scenarios. The third and final lesson that I learned from Leslie Knope is that you're not alone. So when it comes to your own unique individual communication style, just know that your supervisor is there to help you. And depending on what communication style you have, the questions that you want to ask your supervisor are going to change. If you're aggressive like me, don't be afraid to ask for help and advice. It's okay to recognize, okay, maybe I don't know everything in the situation and there's other perspectives I need to gain so that I can make sure I'm having that I win, you win result. If you're passive aggressive, practice communicating openly and honestly so that your supervisor can best help you. I think writing your thoughts down is something that can be helpful to make sure you're communicating those clearly as well. If you're passive, make sure you're clearly expressing your needs. Writing those thoughts down is something that can be helpful, but also make sure that you're not being the one who catches yourself on fire for the sake of your team. Be willing to recognize that you're important too, and the time that you have matters as well. And then finally, if you're assertive, just trust your supervisor to help you find a solution. Understand not everyone has the same communication style as you do, and they may be able to help you come up with some tactics to end up with that I win, you win result. Together, we can build a better team. Today, we were able to identify your own unique communication style. So hopefully you took that and learned something new, and you're going to be able to take that into your future. You now understand the 4 different types of conflict that you may see in the work field. And you got a chance to practice resolving that conflict with our scenarios. Thank you all so much. I'll stick around for questions. If y'all have any, feel free to put those in the chat as well. But that's all I have for you.
Yay. Thank you, Clay. Like Clay said, I hope that you guys were able to get something from this. 10 points to Clay as always. Like he said, we will stick around if you have any questions. Before you leave, next month, we're going to have a professional development thingy thing on financial literacy. So that's something that you guys had asked about. And we have somebody coming from the Department of Finance to do so. And then there is also a webinar happening sometime later this week. I'm going to send that out in the email. So you guys are good to go. If you have any questions, we will be here. But other than that, happy August. And I hope you guys have a great month of service.
Have a great day, everyone.